What's up guys, Readiness Reviews here with you again, and we're back today with another military surplus firearms unboxing. This is a 2-for-1 special. We will be checking out a couple of military surplus rifles today. I purchased these two rifles from Royal Tiger Imports fairly recently. RTI had a pretty big sale on their antique firearms, and I managed to pick up these two heavily discounted from their normal asking price. Being antique firearms, these do not require any kind of CNR license or FFL transfer in order to order. Royal Tiger Imports is very happy to send them straight to your house as long as you are of legal age, making these very accessible firearms for people that are interested in getting into the hobby. Before we take these over to the desk to check them out, don't forget to give the video a thumbs up to help it out with that Google algorithm. Subscribe to the channel to catch all my future military surplus firearm videos. And if you have any ideas of videos you'd like to see here on the channel, let me know about that down in the comments. Now let's take these boxes over to the desk and get them opened up. In the opener, I spoke on how heavily discounted these rifles were. Both rifles actually came in at a price point of $200. And in today's Milsurp firearms market, a $200 rifle is really hard to get your hands on. So even though these days I'm pretty reluctant to make orders from Royal Tiger Imports, I cannot resist the temptation of a couple $200 Milsurp rifles. We will be opening this with a bayonet. If you know what this bayonet is, be sure to let it be known down in the comments. Royal Tiger Imports has been doing a lot better on their packaging the past year or so. The first couple rifles that I received from them were very poorly packaged, but over the last little while, it has been very satisfactory. We have a few packing peanuts in this one, and there is an internal cardboard sleeve. Our rifle appears to be heavily bubble wrapped. Looks like we're going way back with this first rifle. And that is an MLE 1874 Gras carbine manufactured by Tule, probably pronounced that wrong. And surprising enough, the outside of this rifle is actually looking pretty darn nice. Of course, it's not beautiful or anything, but I don't see any major defects. The stock seems to be very solid. I don't see any cracks or anything. Of course, there's all kinds of little dents and pressure marks, but that's to be expected from a rifle that's quite a bit older than any living human. I really like all the brass accents of this rifle, butt plate, trigger guard, and the 3 barrel bands. On the barrel, we have some very interesting markings. This group of markings here are going to be a sign of this firearm's Ethiopian use. The barrel was made by Manufacture d'Armes de Saint-Étienne, and even though we have a barrel stamped MAS, the barrel date has a T in front of it with a date of 1882, so perhaps this is the original barrel to the rifle. Now, as far as serial numbers go, our receiver serial number has a prefix of the French script for R and S, followed by the digits 67501. The bolt is a complete mismatch, 37196, and unfortunately, the serial number on the end of the buttstock here is completely illegible, so I can't even tell what that says. The rondelle marking in the stock is completely worn off. There is no residual sign of it as far as I can tell. The biggest glaring defect of this particular firearm is the lack of a rear sight. Unfortunately, almost all of the Gras carbines that Royal Tiger Imports brought in from Ethiopia had the rear sights removed prior to importation. That is actually such a common feature on these particular Ethiopian firearms that with the current knowledge it's thought that that was actually done on purpose. For what reason, I surely don't know. Now that is a part that I would suspect would be very difficult to replace if you ever wanted to. To be completely honest, this firearm will not be a shooter for me. This is one strictly for collecting purposes, and so the fact that it's missing the rear sight is not a big problem for me, especially because that is a very common characteristic trait of these specific Ethiopian imported Gras. Now this is a carbine, so it's not quite as long as the long rifle, and I just noticed that there is no bayonet attachment method affixed to the barrel here, leading me to the conclusion that this is probably a cavalry carbine model, which were not issued bayonets. Let's open this bolt up. It's a little bit stiff. Yeah, a lot of bit stiff actually. And I think that's because there is a ton of crud down in the action. It is very rusty and ugly. There's just all kinds of built-up rust residue, especially in the chamber. The Gras rifle was France's first metallic cartridge firing rifle. These are black powder rifles, chambered in 11mm Gras. And although these rifles look almost identical to a Chassepot, the main upgrade that they had over the Chassepot was that changeover to firing metallic cartridges. My expertise in firearms collecting is certainly centered around centerfire smokeless powder cartridges. That is what I have focused my collection on. So this rifle is certainly outside of that, being a cartridge firing rifle, but black powder as opposed to smokeless. Normally, I probably wouldn't have bought a Gras since it doesn't really fit in with my overall collection that much, but for a $200 price point, I could not pass it up. And from what I'm seeing so far, I'm going to say I'm happy that I didn't pass it up. I do think that the condition that this rifle is in is certainly worth at least $200, even without the rear sight. The Gras rifles and carbines are not magazine firing firearms. They were single shot bolt action rifles. So you drop around here into the loading area, cycle the bolt, fire the rifle. That was certainly not a very confident hammer drop. Once your cartridge is fired though, you would cycle the action, removing the spent cartridge, and then insert another cartridge and repeat. That kind of technology is what the entire world was moving over to in the 1870s when this rifle was adopted. The Gras rifle was of course replaced by a truly groundbreaking firearm, the 1886 Lebel. And if you want to see a Lebel rifle from Royal Tiger Imports, you can check out the video that I'm posting right here. That is also an antique rifle, but it does shoot a smokeless powder cartridge. The bore on this rifle is a hideous pitted mess, extremely dark and corroded, and the rifling is not well pronounced. Maybe it will clean up a little bit, but to be honest, I'm not expecting much with as bad as it looks, and I'm really not too surprised that it is in that kind of condition, especially given how badly corroded the inside of the chamber is. On physical condition alone though, this rifle certainly checks out. It's not missing anything that I can tell, besides that rear sight and the cleaning rod. I wasn't expecting for that to be included anyway. Both sling loops are present. Upon first inspection, the bolt parts do seem to be there, including the extractor. I am a little bit worried at how light the striker actually strikes. Let's give that one more test for you guys. Yeah, I don't think that would set anything off. So that probably needs some pretty serious cleaning or maybe some new springs. But I seriously doubt I'll be running across 11mm Gras anytime soon to be able to get this rifle out to the range anyway. Now that we've had a look at the first antique rifle, let's dive into the other box and see what else I got. This one was packed just as securely as the first. We're taking it to Austria with this one. This is a Steyr Mannlicher 1888-90 rifle, and it appears to be in substantially worse shape than the Gras we were just looking at. There's very few markings on the receivers of these rifles. We have our OEWG marking there, indicating that this rifle was made in Steyr, Austria, and we have a very corroded looking serial number with what appears to be a V and 3 vertical dots out next to it. I'm not quite sure what that is. If you do know, let me know down in the comments. The more I look at this rifle, the more issues I see with it. The most glaring of which is this massive wrist crack here. This is precisely the kind of crack that would make a firearm non-safe to shoot. So on the right side of the rifle here, it runs all the way from just above the trigger to the tang and end of the receiver there. And on the left side, it starts close to the tang area and again runs all the way to about the trigger. There's another crack here in the toe region of the stock. That looks to line up exactly where the screw is. So I don't know if that screw was forced in there, causing that to open up, but that's a pretty nasty crack. That toe looks like it's about ready to pop off. And on the other side, we have another crack just above that one. So the strength of the toe is without a doubt compromised. We have some very heavy gouging and pressure marks here on the pistol grip. We do have our sling loop. There's another little crack in the wrist area just above the rear action screw. Barrel band here has some brass nails sort of shimmed in sideways, theoretically holding that in place. The middle barrel band appears to be in decent shape at least. All the screws are included and they're actually in pretty good shape. And the nose cap of the rifle appears to be unmolested, also with a pretty decent condition screw. On a lot of these Royal Tiger Imports firearms, the screws will be very heavily damaged. These are serviceable at least. There's our front sight. It's sort of a triangular barley corn front sight. Bayonet lug stacking rod. The Steyr Mannlicher 1888 rifle was designed around a black powder cartridge. In 1890, the Austrians adopted a new cartridge which had a smaller bore diameter and utilized a semi-smokeless powder. The ballistics on that new cartridge were quite a bit superior to the older black powder cartridge, and because of that, the 1888 rifles had to undergo a conversion process so they would shoot true. The quickest way to tell if you have an 1888-90 is the rear sight here. This rifle still retains the old style sight of the 1888. In later iterations of these rifles, the sights were updated. A plate was added to either side of this rear sight, remarking the sight to match the ballistics of the new cartridge. You can clearly see the separation between the sight and the added on side plate. Now let's open this bolt up. That wasn't as stiff as I figured it would be. There's actually some oil on this. I wonder if that's from Royal Tiger Imports or it came in from Africa that way. Other than that little bit of oil, the rifle does look very dry. There is a lot of rusty residue in this rifle as well, all in the chamber area, and there is a slick line of orange rust on the inside of the receiver where the bolt runs. Our magazine spring is intact and feels to have good tension. These rifles are fed with a Mannlicher style M-block clip. This is a straight pull bolt action like our other Mannlicher rifles, but the action of the 1888 is a good bit different from the later 1895, which is a far more common rifle to encounter. The 1890 and 1895 rifles have rotational locking. The 1888 is considered more of a wedge locker, and that is the main reason that these rifles could not be updated to the full power 8x56R cartridge. It's just too much for the locking system of this rifle. Even though these are made out of decent steel, the action just couldn't handle it. I suppose it wouldn't hurt to give this one little dry fire as well, just to make sure it functions. So we can see our cocking piece here is to the rear, and when we squeeze that trigger, that falls, and would fire a round had one been in the chamber. The 8x50 cartridge that this rifle accepts is essentially a unicorn in today's market. It is nearly impossible to find. In the last 10 years, I've ran across it once, maybe twice at gun shows, and I've never seen it for sale online. So this is another rifle that very sadly I will probably not be putting trigger time on anytime soon, but it needs a lot of work before it will be ready for that kind of thing anyway. The bore on this rifle is pretty well trashed itself. Rifling is visible, but it is heavily corroded. There is visible orange rust in the bore, especially towards the muzzle. The muzzle looks very worn, and absolutely none of that comes as a surprise. For a $200 rifle, I was expecting a pretty bad bore. Given the information that I had going into the purchase of this rifle and seeing what others had received from Royal Tiger Imports, good thing I wasn't necessarily looking for a shooter, because this rifle surely isn't it. Aside from our stock issues though, this rifle is not in the worst condition ever. Most of the original bluing has been worn away, whether that was wire wheeling or years of service in Africa. It's pretty hard to tell. On Royal Tiger Imports, these rifles have fluctuated in price up and down ever since they were first available. They have been as high as about $700, and they have been as low as $200, which is what I picked it up at. But most of the time that these rifles have been on Royal Tiger Imports website, they've come in at right around $500. At the moment, I think they're about $350. I'm going to shoot straight with you guys. I always do. For $350, I would not buy one of these rifles. For $500, I most certainly would not buy one of these rifles. But for $200, even in the very rough and non-firing condition this rifle is in, I do think it is probably worth that $200 investment as a pattern collector, just to have an example in my collection. So to make that clear, I don't really recommend going out and picking one of these up yourself, unless you've thought long and hard about what kind of condition that rifle's probably going to show up in. Well, I think I've rambled on long enough for this video. In conclusion, I will say Royal Tiger Imports is a good source for firearms that are hard to find. But in general, that comes at the cost of settling for very poor condition firearms. Had I scoured the secondary market for either of these rifles, I probably could have come across better individual examples for not a whole lot more money. But for what I paid for these two rifles, I'm pretty happy. You essentially get what you pay for, and in this situation, it basically met my expectations. Antique firearms can be a pain in the butt if you want to do a lot of shooting with them. These rifles have many, many years on them, and a lot of times they're not in the most shootable condition. And even if you get your hands on a rifle that is in very shootable condition, ammunition is usually the limiting factor. But keeping all that stuff in mind, should you wish to add some of these old military relics to your collection, you can do so without involving a FFL of any kind. RTI will send them straight to your door as long as you're old enough, and that's pretty cool in my opinion. I want to say a big thank you to you guys for watching the video. Dang, my hands are dirty. Check that out. These rifles need a lot of cleaning. If you liked this video, don't forget to hit that thumbs up. That really helps it out with that Google algorithm. And subscribe to the channel to see all my future content. Let me know down in the comments what you thought about these rifles. Did I get ripped off? Are they worth 200 bucks a piece? What are your guys' opinions? If you would like to see individual videos on either of these two rifles, let that be known in the comments as well. That may be something that we do in the future. But for now, I will catch you guys in the next video. See you then. Peace.